it is the end of the year. It's the off season, so that normally means it's pretty quiet and there's not really much going on. And then you get hit with a breaking news story that Iga Swiatek's failed a drugs test, and that's been quite a big story. I just wanted to get your quick thoughts on that, and and your feelings towards the case, and maybe some similarities between sinners potentially as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I was shocked. I was as shocked to read about Iga as I was when the story broke just before the U.S. Open about Sinner, because I've always seen each of them as very straightforward, decent, honorable people. Then I would never have suspected either one. It tells me two things: the authorities are doing their job, which is they can't discriminate, nor can they exclude top players. I mean, there's got to be a fair process. What's confusing to me, what I don't like, is that the Swiatek case reminds me a bit of Sinner in the sense that suddenly we're finding out now, and there was a provisional suspension, and she played on, and then now she accepts the terms. And I don't say that skeptically of her. I'm just saying this is when we find out about it. And then the question I have, which wasn't raised in that initial report, is will WADA perhaps object to this one too? WADA stepped in on Sinner and said, no, we don't feel that's a sufficient punishment. And they believe it should be 1 to 2 years. So we're waiting for the Court of Arbitration now. And we should learn that in the next month, how that's resolved. The bottom line with me is I feel like in each of the similarities, it appears that neither one was deliberately trying to get away with anything. Then the question becomes, how much of a price do you pay for the people around you, or what you put into your system unintentionally? It's so complicated, and I feel like I don't feel like hers is out of line. You look at what happened to Sinner initially before WADA stepped in, and they basically were saying, we don't really think you did it intentionally. We're taking away your Indian Wells points. We're taking away your Indian Wells prize money. You're fine. You're good to go now. Be more careful next time. That seemed to be what they were saying. And then WADA said, not so fast. So I don't know what's going to happen with Igas. But again, neither case strikes me as a player trying to get away with something. And it appears that there were very trace amounts with her as well. So I hope it's resolved soon. I hope we don't get an appeal. WADA has every right to do it if they want. But my bottom line is not to belabor this whole discussion, because I know we have a lot of ground to cover on other topics. But I feel like the process takes too long. As Sinner found out, for instance, he found out about his suspension. He knew about it not long after Indian Wells. He was carrying that around with him for months, trying to get it resolved. Then they made the announcement right before the Open. That subjected him to criticism from players like Kyrgios and Denis Shapovalov, who I thought took kind of pot shots at him. And but at least then he moved to the Open, won the Open, seemed to be enjoying himself again, seemed to have moved past it. And then it was not that long after the Open we find out about the appeal. So I just feel like it's not fair, regardless of what the ultimate punishment is, that they have to live with it for so long. It wasn't fair to Simona Halep, who was very unhappy, I read today, about the decision regarding Iga. It wasn't fair to her that she got hit with 4 years and this took so long, and finally she did win her appeal. They reduced it to 6 months, something like that, but she'd already served a lot of time, or 9 months, whatever it was. They cut it way down and decided to give her the time that she'd already had to take off. But she felt like there was this was very unfair, the Iga case versus hers. I think they're all different. I don't know whether, I understand why Simona would feel that way. I don't know whether she's necessarily right, because each and every case is different, has to be evaluated on its own merits. But I hate to see it, in summation, I hate to see one player who was ranked number one, who's number two now in Iga, and the number one male player. It's not something we like to see happen in tennis. As I said at the outset, it's still, the positive is that the authorities are not letting anybody off. They're treating everybody, trying to treat everybody equally, and therefore are willing to suspend players of that stature. But I just wish they could. There could be the governing bodies, the ITIA and WADA and the Court of Appeal. I wish they could get this whole thing compressed in all of these cases so that everybody moves quickly. They have the information. They should be able to evaluate much faster, in my view, than they do. And meantime, the player has to, whether it was Halep, whether it's these two now, Iga and Sinner, they have to wait an awfully long time, and they have the burden of carrying that around with them every single day, not knowing what's next. I mean, I think Sinner has handled it remarkably well in the way that he immediately won the Open and the great fall that he's had, and winning the UN Championships and winning the Davis Cup. He seems to be able to compartmentalize very well, but he deserves to know long before he would get on a plane to go to Australia whether he's getting suspended for a year or two or whether he's done with it. And Iga, it appears, I'm guessing now there won't be an appeal, but I may be wrong. I mean, who's to say that WADA doesn't say again, that's too light a sentence.